Would the secretary note that Stephen Larson, he's usually late, so just
Okay.
put a maybe down.
Okay.
I think he gets out of work about the same time we meet. Okay, that's it for the roll call. Approval of the agenda, is there approval of the agenda motion?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved in second, and all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Approval of the minutes of January 29th.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Moved in second, and all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Item 1, general business consideration of possible action on the reports of the police department. And we don't have a representative of the police department here. Is there any questions or observations of the stuff that was in the packet that somebody wants to talk about?
If there isn't, I'll make a motion to receive and place in file.
Received and placed on file, is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Item number 2, consideration of possible action to study the intersection of Shawano Avenue and north-south Oakland Avenue to make signage or design improvements to deter reckless driving and accidents. The history of accident data is also requested for review, request by Alder Johnson. Steve, do you have any comments on this one?
Okay, the traffic technician was able to prepare the graphic that we have on the screen. So between 2021 and February of this year, there have been 5 reported crashes, 2 in 21, 2 in 22, and 1 in 23. Of those 5 crashes, 2 were hit and run, so no good data was able to be gathered from them. The July 17th of 21 was a eastbound rear end crash, so that's this diagram here,
Okay.
resulted from a distracted driver following someone. Saturday, May 7th of 2022, we have this, where it was a northbound vehicle on Oakland, approached the intersection, properly stopped, and proceeded into the intersection, did not see a westbound vehicle in Walnut Street in the outside lane. So that vehicle had to travel across 3 lanes of traffic before it struck the westbound vehicle. Can only surmise that possibly the westbound vehicle got lost in the A-pillar of the vehicle heading northbound. Crash on October 27th of 23 is up here. That was a southbound vehicle on Oakland, entered the intersection, was struck by another westbound vehicle. And then the November 6th, 2023 was a hit and run rear end, but we don't know if the vehicle was eastbound or westbound based off of the information not provided in the in the crash report from police department. So we do have your crash summary there and a crash summary diagram for those that we could. Given the traffic volumes at this location, both the traffic technician and I have been out there. Sight lights are pretty darn good out there, actually. We see no engineering, no signage, no geometric improvements out there that could improve or decrease the crash rate, seeing as the crash rate is awful low. So staff recommendation is to receive and place on file the request with a no action.
Okay. Is there any questions of any of the commissioners? Patrick,
Steve, what
Dan?
angles, I mean, it's not a square intersection. What angles are we looking at degrees wise?
It's about a 45, 135, Dan. If, to place it into perspective with landmarks, that would be immediately to the west of, I believe it's a Taco Burrito Mexico restaurant on the north side of Walnut Street there where Walnut becomes Shawano.
Yeah, yep. Okay, yeah, I was just curious what the angles were there. I know, like in some subdivision ordinances and things that I've worked in, once you get to a certain point, they discourage those roads. I know we're working with existing conditions, but I was just curious what the angles and degrees were.
Further comments or questions from members of the commission?
Sure, was speed an issue on those crashes too, or no?
That we don't know. It wasn't necessarily indicated that speed was an issue there. We do know that oftentimes Shawano Avenue does suffer from speed, require speed enforcement. I would suspect, just my own, based on personal observations, eastbound traffic is less of a problem when it comes to speed because you're entering the curve, whereas westbound traffic, you are leaving the stoplight, the traffic signal, and as you are coming through the curve, you're accelerating into a longer straight tangent section. So it's not as surprising to me that the two crashes that we have, where it's more right angle crash or intersection crashes, that those would both be westbound.
Okay. Any other questions?
Do we have a person waiting?
Oh.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to receive and place on file as directed.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Dan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Hey, Steve, real quickly, I guess if we do see continued crashes at that location, would a consideration of closing cross traffic on Oakland be a consideration?
To be honest with you, if we see a increase in accident rate out there, I think just about anything would be on the table.
Okay.
I don't know that we're in a position to say no to anything. A lot of that's going to be data driven based off of what we see, the number of crashes and the types. If left turning movements would be a major contributing factor to the crash rate, then yeah, we would definitely look at restricting or eliminating those left turn movements.
Yep.
Okay. Any no's?
I don't know, but do we know if Mitzi is on, what Mitzi is on for? Like, is she on for this? Do you know if Mitzi's on?
Let's ask her. Mitzi, can you hear us?
I don't know, that's why I'm like, I'm not sure. She might be interested in one of these topics. We don't know. Now we have Travis Rockwell. I don't know how.
Can she
I don't
hear
know
us?
how we handle these. Like, fill up and talk if they're here to talk or something.
Yeah.
Can we unmute them?
They can unmute themselves.
Mitzi? Can you hear us?
Now we have a Travis. It's coming in for something.
No, let's move on.
Okay.
Items 3 and 4, is there any reason not to take those two in mass?
I would suggest that you take them together.
All right, is,
Make a motion to suspend the rules and take 3 and 4 together.
all
I'll
right,
second that.
all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, the ayes have it. Approval of the terminations,
Motion to approve.
is there a second?
Second.
Second? Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Item 5, refer back from initial request of January 29th. Consideration with possible action on the request of Alder Stevens to amend the existing ordinance to allow traffic calming measures on collector streets within the city. And I think we should probably take 5 and 6 together because they are very much related. Consideration, number 6 is consideration of possible action, the request of Alder Stevens to amend the existing ordinance to include traffic calming measures with all new and reconstructed streets. Alder Stevens, do you have any comments?
Not at this time. Is that why you're here?
Is she here to comment on this?
Yeah, so my understanding was that these two items were referred to staff. So I guess the question I have is what the action is that's being requested today. It seems like maybe these are more appropriate for an informational item in terms of the ordinance drafting, because I think they were already referred to staff.
Right.
Sure, has that been completed?
It has not. I think the original communication, I think, might be a little bit off. This is not an ordinance, it's actually a policy.
Okay.
But it is a policy that this body did vote on, and it was forwarded on and recommended for approval, and common council did adopt it, but it's not truly ordinance language, so we won't be suggesting any ordinance language. We would be looking at potential revisions to the policy.
So that's out of our hands now then?
Nope, it's still coming back here.
Oh, okay.
For this, I did reach out to the 15 largest municipalities in the state, plus I reached out to our neighboring communities. Getting the data back has been challenging. So I actually have phone calls in again today to Madison and Janesville, I believe, trying to get the information out of those two cities, and then I believe it's Waukesha responded to me late last week indicating they would have data to me this week. So I'm down 3 out of the 15, but
Because even Appleton didn't get you any?
no, Appleton actually did
Oh, they
provide me
did?
with some feedback.
Okay.
So
Sounds like
it's a
a
matter of
nice-
grabbing that stuff, pulling it together. A few of the municipalities actually do have formal policies like we do, but surprisingly few. Probably only 3 or 4 in the state, besides ourselves. Those who do have policies, they're substantial enough, 20 or so page documents. So I'm still trying to pull data out of that and pull it together for comparison to ours. As far as I've been able to tell so far, it really only looks like 1 or 2 other municipalities have subjectively published threshold data, which is one of the things that this commission's asked me to take a look at was our thresholds. So it looks like we may be a little bit more restrictive on that than some of our partner agencies are. A lot of the municipalities, even those, if they don't have formal written established policies, they do consider some traffic calming, but it's more so on an objective case-by-case basis. And most of them, if they are doing traffic calming without a formally written established policy, they are concentrating more on phase 1 type traffic calming, which would be low cost, easy implementation, not necessarily infrastructure driven, more so the painting, lane restrictions, things that you can do quickly with paint or signage, as opposed to a more aggressive nature with bump outs, chokers, chicanes, traffic circles, speed bumps, anything like that. Any of the municipalities that I've seen so far here in Wisconsin who are contemplating those types of activities, those phase 2 activities have largely been restricted to neighborhoods, much like our policy shows.
I'm guessing that's just because of budgeting, because they
I
can
don't
afford- they
know
can
that
afford phase one and
to be
phase two
honest with
traffic.
you, my take on it is more that the last time we revised ours with any substantive changes was 2019. And my feeling is more along that line, is that they adopted their policies and they simply haven't gone back to them.
Well, one thing I'd like to separate out, because you mentioned that the thresholds are potentially too high. That was an original request by Commissioner Teeters several meetings ago. And that really applies to our current policy. This, I think, is a separate issue. It's traffic calming, but it refers to construction of new streets, construction of allowance for construction of collectors. Am I reading your request
That would be
correctly,
correct.
Alder?
Yeah, so, to clarify, there is no ordinance regarding this type of
It sounds
work?
like it's a policy, a
Okay.
policy that's been adopted by council.
Correct.
Okay.
It's the same process though, through committee and council for approval.
Educate me and maybe some of the commission members, the difference between a policy and an ordinance and the differences, if any, in the approval process.
The approval process is usually the same, has to go through committee and council approval, which an ordinance also receives council approval. Notice processes are different, publication is different. Ordinances are published in the Muni Code, and generally policies are utilized for the purpose of directing city operations and how we conduct our work, where ordinances are more outward facing and what our members of the public need to do to comply with various city ordinances, whether it be on parking or anything else. It's the difference, generally.
Okay. Alder Stevens, this was your request. How would you like
I don't
us to
recall a
proceed?
policy being brought up 60 days ago, but I can be wrong, so, because I think we would have amended the policies instead of ordinance. You recall anything about policy last time? Me neither.
I think referring to staff still accomplishes the same, though you want the policy changed, whether it was called an ordinance. Director Grenier said the intention is still the same, to make
Sure.
changes.
Okay. Question, Steve, how long would it take to implement these two requests as far as policy?
Given the amount of work that we've got into it and what we anticipate being left, I think we're within a week or two of having a report for you that would show you a comparison of ourselves to the other municipalities, and then seek, because the other thing I'm looking for is I'm going to be looking for some guidance on what types of changes are you looking for?
Would you be giving us, at, let's say, the next meeting, a written policy addressing just these two issues?
No, I'd be giving you a kind of a red line of the policy, suggesting possible changes to the entire policy that would accomplish, at a minimum, what you've got here.
Okay, because I don't want to get into the argument of all the other things that
No, I understand.
come in traffic calming.
Sure.
I just want these two issues addressed. And if we're going to be able to see something in writing at the next meeting,
You definitely will.
I think that would satisfy the concerns that many of us have.
Well-
And one of the things that I'm concerned about is that this is not a these two documents, or these two proposals, as I see it, and I am just one member of the commission, they do not seem to be mandates that you have to do something as a department. They're more of a way of saying to the city council that there are options out there. If you take a look at a connector street and you can, have a policy that would allow the city council and the department to work together to put traffic calming on a connector street, that is an allowance, it's not a mandate.
Sure.
Am I reading your concern, Alder?
That would be correct, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Patrick and Dan,
Yeah, do you mind if I pipe in with a few comments?
please do.
Okay, yeah, I guess my take on this is that, I think these are pretty broad brushstrokes as far as the communication goes. I think what we would probably want to do is let Steve gather the information. And then, Steve, if you could, I'd like to see the list of the 15 municipalities that you've contacted, and then which ones do have a policy, which ones don't. Just kind of put that into like an Excel spreadsheet or a table or something that's easy consumable. And then from there, I think if we find ones that are somewhat comparable or not, we can use those as kind of our guinea pig. But I don't know that we really want to have traffic calming on all collectors. Maybe it's all collectors that aren't functionally classified, or maybe they all are functionally classified. That's another level of consideration. I think the deeper we get into this, we're going to have some additional things to be talking about that will probably guide exactly what happens to the policy. But I certainly think that taking a look at your benchmarks or your thresholds is really going to glean, whether it should be changed or not. And certainly, I think, it should and could be a consideration for new construction. However, with new construction, it's probably going to be a little bit cheaper instead of retrofitting. But hopefully, if we design it the right way, we'll shouldn't have to come back and retrofit anything later. But yeah, I guess those are my general thoughts on it. I think we've got a lot of data that we're going to have to go through and talk through with Steve at the next meeting.
Okay?
And with that in mind, Dan, if I'm remembering correctly, Wauwatosa and West Allis provide for collectors, those classified as collectors but have average daily traffic counts which are substantially below what you'd normally see on a collector, and it's a qualitative feel as to whether they primarily function in a residential capacity or something along those lines. They have that type of provision which allows for them. What I'm going to be looking for some feedback from the commission would be, would we be looking to allow certain traffic calming for consideration on certain classifications of streets, but not necessarily on others? And in particular, what I'm thinking of is you wouldn't want speed tables on a major arterial, something along that line. But a collector that has less than 800 vehicles a day that functions more so in a residential area would be available for any type of traffic calming. Minor arterials and collectors which are larger than a residential collector, we could look at phase one type things, which would be paint driven, but maybe not building out infrastructure, because the higher probability is that could be accident inducing, and those streets likely aren't going to be up for a reconstruct anytime soon as well. So a situation like our East Walnut Street between Webster Avenue and Baird Street. The buffered bike lanes we put in there were not put in for traffic calming. That was simply to get a bike lane down Walnut Street. However, it functions as traffic calming. We've seen that it's driven the speeds down, and that is a visually narrowed or visually restricted roadway is a phase one traffic calming effect. So things like that may be applicable on a higher volume street that has a higher functional classification, but building a choker or putting a median island down the center of it to force that traffic out and trying to slow it down may not be the appropriate type of action for that type of a street. So have the ability to look at various alternatives, but maybe not have everything available everywhere.
Yeah,
Couple-
I think,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
you're talking about some level of context sensitivity for your ability to apply or not apply your traffic calming measures.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Steve, will your colleagues provide you with thresholds that they use?
Anyone who has them, what I've asked for is, the questions that I asked was, do you have a traffic calming policy? And if you do, is it available online? Now, of those who have a formal policy, the only one who doesn't have it available online at this point is Racine, because Racine's is a draft. But my counterpart down there is a good friend, and he was able to provide me with a copy of the draft that their common council is currently considering. So if they have them, unfortunately, it looks like a lot of them reference that upon request, we will study the traffic volumes, do a speed study, and look at the functional classification of the road, but they don't explicitly state in the policy that here's the go, no-go. There's really only 2 or 3 of them, Green Bay included, that have that go, no-go.
One of the issues that you're gonna run into when you develop a policy, and that is, you mentioned traffic counts, for instance,
Right.
as an item. But you have to give leeway to either the department or the common council
Sure.
when it comes to new construction. I think that was the thing that initially brought this thing to the commission, is a proposal on the west side for new construction. So you have to have an allowance there that does not go through the normal process that would be developed for establishing a threshold
Sure.
for construction.
Well, and even with that, I think that's not an insurmountable task, because based on the proposed land use, we have a pretty good idea of what the traffic volumes are going to be, even on new construction.
Okay.
So that I don't think that's not something that would be insurmountable.
Okay. Can you, in the next week or so, put together some recommendations and alternatives that we can study before the next meeting? Because I think that the volume of information is gonna be rather overwhelming, and I think the members of the commission would appreciate the opportunity to study not only what you find out from your colleagues, but also what type of alternatives are we going to be addressing for these particular 2 issues?
What I will promise you is that I will have a larger discussion with law department. There are some restrictions on being able to communicate en masse with the commission and violating open meeting records and having quorum. So I will work with law department, and to the greatest extent that we can, I will get you as much information as early as I can.
Okay, appreciate it. Alder Stevens, what is your preference?
Well, thank you for the update. I think we just continue. We could change it to amend these 2 and get rid of ordinance to say policy.
Good call.
I'll make the motion.
I'll make a motion to amend 5 and 6 to policy instead of ordinance.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Let me ask the law department. So we're talking about the same procedures going through committee, going to the common council. Is there any differences that, in this particular motion, that we should be aware of?
The approval process is still the same. I was thinking before about, you refer back from initial request, this was just for additional discussion, and I think that's fine going forward. Generally, if you weren't taking action on an item and you were just maybe providing feedback or asking questions, it would likely just be informational. But I think it's fine, and if you want to amend it from ordinance to policy to be correct, you can amend this item. But you're still, it's going back to staff with your comments and requests from tonight. So it might be appropriate to both amend it and refer it back to staff,
Right.
just for clarity.
Oh, we didn't
You
vote on
amended
that.
it.
We didn't vote on
But
it.
to
You
refer it back to
amended it,
staff as
refer, so
amended.
yeah.
I'll make a motion to refer
Yeah.
5
Well,
and 6.
Let's,
Let's take the first motion first.
correct.
So the
Okay.
first motion would be to change ordinance to policy.
Correct.
Any further comments? Dan and Patrick, do you have any comments or concerns on that? Okay.
Oh,
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed, nay, the ayes have it. Okay, the second motion.
I'll make a motion to refer back till next meeting for
Refer-
5 and 6.
Refer back until next meeting for 5 and 6 with some policy recommendations coming from the department. And there is a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
I,
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay. The next meeting would be April 15th, tax day. Okay? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Patrick? Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, everyone.